This is Family Electric Ghost, and we're live on air with Deborah Heiser. You're a founder, CEO, and author. And I want to thank you for being on the Family Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on your show.
We want to let people know that we got the mentorproject.org as a URL there. That will be fully clickable. And we'll also let people know that we are a featured podcast on the Newsly Network, and you can see that coupon code below Ghost, and you can check that out for 30 days for free. Be on there later tonight as an audio only version of this episode. And then I always ask every guest a couple questions before we get to the heart of your story. What motivates you, and why do you do what you do?
I think I'm motivated by connecting with people. I really like people, and so that motivates me.
That's cool to be a people person.
Yeah, I think so. Everybody has something interesting that they have to say or that they do, or I can always learn something from people. So I think that is what motivates me, getting to talk to people.
Yeah, it's kind of like why I do the podcast. I get to talk to a lot of people. It's the same kind of thing. I think if you're an artist or a writer, you need to experience the world. So the
Yeah.
more people you connect with, the more material you have in your reservoir of all these ideas that you have to bring to the world.
That's so true. That's so true. And you can make a whole world outside, in your mind, even of all of the experiences that you have with people. It's so cool.
Yeah, it's interesting how you can your subconscious or what you actually retain, because like you have a dream or you have these ideas and it's kind of
Yeah.
it just comes out. You're playing a musician. Sometimes like, oh, some show tune shows up and I didn't even know I was gonna play it. And it just pops out of my fingers. In
Yeah.
the middle of playing a song, it's like suddenly I'm playing something. It's like, how did that come out? It's like it's in my head because it's
Yeah.
in there.
Exactly. Those connections in your mind just come out whenever.
So like when you got into mentoring, like what made you want to be a mentor?
It's a very sort of long journey to get to that point.
Mm.
It wasn't like a moment. If I were to start and look back at everything, I, I got into psychology because my grandmother, who I used to visit in Florida, was suffering from depression. And I didn't even know what depression was. She was just this cool grandma who always had the fun clothes, and you could visit her without taking anything with you but shoes and run around and have a great time. And then one day when we visited, she was not the fun grandma. She was grouchy grandma. And so I asked someone, what's wrong with grandma? And she lived in an independent living place. And they said, don't worry, we'll fix her. And I was like, what do you mean? And
Exactly.
they said, well, she's depressed. And I was like, what is depression? And they said, listen, her meds that she's taking for her illness, were causing her to feel depressed. So I was like, okay. So I came back a few months later and she was fixed. She was back to herself. So I was like, I need to do this. I need to fix grandmas as a living because I loved my grandma. I thought she was great. And so it changed my world. So I decided to become an aging specialist. I went into research to study everything no one ever wants to have or get in their lives. And I went to a dinner party and was so excited to tell somebody all about what I do and, tell them all about the depression research, my end of life research, all this stuff that nobody really wants to hear about over dinner. And the person said, well, what do we have to look forward to as we get older? And I was like, I don't know. And that's when the aha moment happened. And I went back to the drawing board, went back to research, back to theory and developmental studies, and started to look at what happens to us that's good and what can we expect as we get older. And I found this whole amazing amount of research showing how we can expect to be happier as we get older and all of these amazing things. And within that, you hit a point in midlife where you're built to want to give back, and giving back actually makes you feel better. Like research shows this. I was blown away. So I pivoted and started to look at mentorship, because mentorship is a way that we give back. And it's a way of taking a piece of us and giving it to somebody else. And it's kind of like immortality, a little bit of
Yeah,
us
you're
lives on in
teaching.
somebody else. And that's
Yeah,
how
it's
I
like
got into it.
well, it's like a teaching moment. I think a lot of times you start to realize as you get older, you could think there's a decline. Compare
Yeah.
57-year-old me versus 17-year-old me. It's like, okay, like maybe I don't have the energy, or maybe I do. It
Yeah.
depends. It really depends on your mind. Like I've been around, 70-year-olds, like blues guys that have more energy than some of the young guys I know. Some of the 20 something,
But
they're more vital in terms of what they're working on and what they're doing
yeah.
than some other people. So it's like age is just a number. It depends like where you're at with your frame of mind.
Oh, for sure. Frame of mind is definitely a component of it. But also, I'm 56. I cannot run as fast as I used to, and I don't care. And I have to wear glasses now. I never had to wear glasses. I really don't care. And I'm happy. So I always tell my students, you can outrun me, but I'm happier than you. Because when you're younger, you have so many things you have to worry about. It feels like the carefree days when you're in your 20s, but you have to worry about, who am I? What am I going to land as my career? I have to find most people are thinking they need a partner. They need to get a independent living in some way. There's all these,
A lot of angst.
worries that they have that are exciting, but there's a burden to them as well. So when you're in your 50s, you don't have that. I know who I am. I know what I'm good at. I pursue the things that I'm good at. I know what I'm not so good at, so I don't spend my time in that. I have my close friends. I have my family. So when we're in our midlife, we are freed up to be able to have the time and space to want to give back, to someone else without saying, "Hey, you better pay me or do something for me." We're at this age ready to leave our mark.
Yeah, I think it's important to have like have a story to tell. If you think
Yeah,
about it, like when you if you're trying to leave, like every artist is trying to leave their mark on the world.
yeah,
You're a writer, you're creating that piece of work. You're a painter, you're a
yeah,
musician. You're trying to put it down. Kind of like I always go back to this. William Blake's one of my favorite poets, but like in his time, he's one of the great romantic poets, but he wasn't known in his time.
yeah.
But he put all those poems on metal etchings and acid, and they found them in a barn.
Wow.
And he kind of knew, well, I want to make these permanent.
Yeah, that was smart.
Yeah, it's this idea is like, well, if they're not on paper and they're on these metal plates, then there's all this art that goes with each one of the songs of innocence and
Yeah,
experience. There's art that goes with those poems. Some people don't know that; they've never seen the art, but
yeah,
it's the idea of it. Like it's like a metaphor. It's like you can leave something for another generation, even if it's not
yeah.
like in your time. It's like if you put the work down, people will actually, you can benefit not just your time, but maybe the next time.
Absolutely. I mean, what you're doing right now is doing that. You've been doing that since 2016 with every podcast that you do. You're putting yourself out there to people that you may never see or know, but a little bit of you is going out there in every single podcast, and that's kind of cool. That's leaving a legacy. That's a way. That's a form of modern mentorship. When mentoring was first thought of, that was not. There were no podcasts. And technology has sort of shifted and changed the way that we see the way that we give to others. And so it's kind of cool to see that. So rather than a barn, you're putting your stuff out there for everybody to see now and forever and to
Yeah,
hear
into
now and
into
forever.
the into the ether of the
Yeah.
internet.
Yeah.
Because it's like a lot of that stuff's like permanent. Once it gets on YouTube, it's on in their it's in there. It's
Exactly.
on there. It's there.
Phantom is not a phantom.
Yeah. But I think a lot of times, people think about retirement and they think about like, oh, well, all the things like that you can't do. But a lot of times, if you start to open up and it's like, okay, maybe you should give your talents and like you said, mentored some younger people about you're a business person, teach people how to run a business. You're a musician, teach other musicians how to play and how to write, how to put things together, and like you can just kind of pass it, pay it forward. If you start to
Yeah.
realize that you can pay it forward, and it's just, to me, it's fun to
Yeah.
realize that you're not at the end. Like there's a lot to do, and I've seen a lot of like older musicians that they still feel like they have a lot to contribute, and you're like, I'm going to keep on playing until I'm not here.
Yeah,
You know
there's
what I mean?
nobody that says, "Oh,
I'm done.
I've done enough. I've done enough of what I enjoy." It's like saying there's enough chocolate. I've had enough. I don't need any more. Like there's
Yeah.
just, we all have that desire to give back. And you're a musician. Mentorship isn't just hierarchical, giving back to the next generation or somebody younger. Everybody who plays in a band is what I would call a lateral mentor. And I write about that in the book that I wrote about how we can be experts and in a group of other experts who are not our boss. So when you
Mhm.
sit down in a band and everyone's playing a different instrument and they're all an expert in their own area of music, or if it's in the tech area of music, everybody has their different expertise, but you cannot make a song, or a band cannot operate with just one person. It requires everybody and everybody's input to make that one thing happen. And that's something that really a lot of people get enjoyment from, because
It's like
it's a
teamwork.
yeah,
It's
because you're
kind of like a sport.
connecting with others. You feel that connection. The emotion of somebody in music, if you're working with other people, the emotion comes through in how people are thinking and feeling together as a group too. So that's
Yeah,
super powerful.
a lot of nonverbal communication.
Yeah.
A lot of things is like if I play with a bunch of guys, they're doing like we're doing like jazz experimental stuff. We've been playing so long, we don't have to even tell each other. We can like look.
Yeah.
I can look at the drummer. I can look at the guy playing sax. They kind of know when I look at them and they look at me. It's like I know what they
Yeah.
want.
Yeah. Is and that seems like magic to somebody else watching or looking in, but you guys are such experts that you can do that. Team players do that. Anybody who's working together, but connections are so powerful, and mentorship is a form of connecting. You don't have to be a boss. You can be somebody who's connected with somebody. It can be even the way that culture is passed down and values.
Hmm.
That is, not a boss. That might be a grandma, or that could be somebody in your family, but that is how we have like our family traditions that could
Like
pass
oral
down.
histories. Yeah, the oral histories like that.
Yeah,
That's like the old form of human knowledge is
right.
like not written knowledge. It's I'm part Cherokee Blackfoot, and it's like the oral histories of
Yep,
indigenous peoples all over the world. There's a
yep,
lot to those oral stories that were never written down, but they're handed down
exactly.
through communication, and
Exactly.
and that's like invaluable.
And that's mentorship. A lot of people think, "Oh, I can't be a mentor if I'm not an accountant or I'm not some, kind of professional." But our most powerful, you never hear of somebody being like, "Oh, the accountant story that's been passed down for generations." Nobody hears of
Nobody wants
that.
that one.
But like you said, culture, and the stories that you're going to hear from other people in, the Cherokee tribe is going to be similar. And that's because everybody's passing the stories together. It's a whole culture, values, traditions. That is powerful. And that is not from a hierarchical mentoring standpoint. That is more of a lateral mentoring that
Yeah,
passes that
cultural
information.
in the arts, because it's interesting. A lot of people look at people who are artists and say, "When are you going to get a real job?" But art is like the foundation of culture,
Yes,
and the
it is.
oral histories and the things that people kind of think aren't like they think the accountant, they think the lawyer, the doctor is worth
Mhm.
more money, but the culture is like the foundation. It's like the pillar. It's like the
Yeah,
pillar of the society. But you start to devalue that oral
exactly.
history or the culture, you're kind of devaluing your own human nature.
You're right about that. That's the deepness of it. The arts really has always been everyone in the arts understands this. But if you talk to people in business, they really do oftentimes get it wrong, where they think that mentorship is taking somebody from a moment, at work, where you're trying to teach somebody how to leverage themselves within this very narrow space that will never translate outside the doors of the company. And that's a waste. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's a wasted opportunity to think that that's all that mentoring is. Because
Hmm.
imagine going to any holiday and you don't smell the foods that you expect to smell. You don't taste the foods. You don't see what is around you that you expect. Imagine that you don't have people behaving the way that you expect when you go to any kind of a tradition, whether it's religious or cultural or whatever that is. It's a feeling of lack of connection then. That grounds
Hmm.
us. It makes us feel like we are part of the world and in a meaningful, important part of the world. So that's where the real value is.
Yeah, when you have like a family get together and outing, you
Mhm.
have all the generations, the great grandparents, the grandparents, the uncles and aunts,
Yeah.
and they're all telling these stories. I remember going back to every outing I ever had. It's like the stories old, my aunt saying this, my uncle Jack saying that. And it's like these, it's just a tradition.
Yeah.
And then you get news stories from the next generation and they're telling their story.
Yep.
And the storytelling is so connected to like the family structure. Everybody knows that uncle, or they know their aunt, and they know the
Yeah.
grandmother. They know the like what the family's about.
Exactly.
But
You know the essence of everything.
yeah, and I mean when you get to this world where everybody's talking about AI, and I'm a technologist, so I looked at things as tools.
Yeah.
But I think there's some missteps where people think it can just replace humanity.
No.
And I was talking to some tech bros. I always call them tech bros, but not to put them down. But they were just like saying, "Well, we can place an actor, we can place an artist, we can place a painter." I said, "Well, I understand why you say that because you're gonna make money from replacing those people, but you need to understand from a cultural perspective, if you just mass replace without understanding the value,
Yeah.
then you're kind of like a bean counter taking away culture."
Yeah. It's like having a canvas that's just gesso. You're removing all of the stuff that makes it what it is. I we just had a holiday and we have another one coming up. And I, every holiday, make my grandmother's recipes that are handwritten on a card that were probably from her mother. I don't know, but it's in her handwriting. And if I leave anything out of that
Jeez.
meal, people are upset. So I had my uncle visit I'm not originally from here. I'm originally from a different state. And my uncle came to visit and he had the dinner at our house. And he said, "Wow, this is exactly what I grew up with." And that's the kind of thing that, from beginning to end, it was the exact same thing. And that's really powerful. Like the fact that you can go someplace and it locks you back into your past
Yeah.
and it makes you feel really comforted.
Makes
So
you feel connected because I think the
mhm.
problem with some of this technology, it gets you disconnected. Like, if you
Yes,
don't value your fellow human being and you
yes,
just think that I can just replace, somebody with a robot, somebody with a chat bot, the thing is, like, even therapists saying, I can have an AI chatbot replace a conversation. Well, therapy to me is like it's your unique insight as a human being to be able to kind of be in the moment and hear somebody and not just go to a machine library
yeah,
and try and find something that matches. And the problem with AI, it will try to make you happy by giving you a response, but that response is not necessarily right.
I agree. Yeah,
It will actually just give you one, and then you have to actually keep on checking it because like it will give you hallucinations. It will go and do all these things. Which it will get, unlike old computers, it will give you an answer. It's kind of like, oh, you might just take it, but then you're like, that's kind of suspect if you just take it.
yeah. It gives. There's a flatness to video games. You can see characters in video games, and there's a flatness to it.
Yeah,
You need to
no
have
art
like,
to it.
yeah. Well, there's an actual core to it. So I'm speaking with you and you're real. There's a difference there than if it's an unreal AI bot or if it's an unreal, you know, video game avatar, something like that, that you cannot replace. And that's
It's like
something.
synthetic. It's like that synthetic. Like you kind of start through the what? Why do you call it synthetic? Because it's not the actual real deal.
Yeah. But, I remember people saying that, we have now a lot of Zoom meetings, and now people will do therapy over Zoom. Zoom is used for telehealth, all kinds of things. We now get our information from, um, videos that are on YouTube and other places. I don't think that's bad. I think that we're evolving and using these ways that we can connect with others. I wouldn't have connected with you otherwise.
Oh
We
yeah,
live in
that's
different
a good
places.
technology. Yeah,
Yeah, so I can still connect with people, but we do need to take it that step further. We're not done. If somebody's going to have a meaningful connection, it can't be just a one-off. There has
mhm,
to be that deeper understanding of who you are, who I
deeper
am,
dive.
and that's the important thing. So if you've done 1,200 podcasts, people might be able to have a deeper understanding of who you are because they may have watched you 1,200 times and heard you 1,200 times, but they wouldn't have that from me doing this right here with you. And that's something that, and I don't have that reciprocal, meaningful connection with the other person. And that's what's important to know is that tech is great for being a bridge to something. It's great for getting us to places, but it's not a replacement. It's not a full replacement for mentorship. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think the problem is like people love to go with the quick fix, like the magic pill.
Yeah.
And in our society, with everything that always comes along, it's like, oh, it's magic. It's gonna do this. But you always have to look at things as, as an artist, I'm not gonna use AI to write my song.
Right.
Uh, there are people that will though. There are people that are doing it. And then it's kind of like when if you're an author and you see somebody do an AI cover of a
Yeah.
book versus a professional artist. There
Yeah.
seems to be like a professional artist that actually sat down and talked to the author, had meetings with the author. There's gonna be a big difference between what that cover looks like and what the AI cover.
Yeah. You're right. And with
It's
other theories and other ideas and science and all of those things, we have to really always make sure that we're bringing the human element to things. That's just my thought, that there needs to be a human element in
yeah, and I
things.
think that's where you need that kind of personal touch. You
Yeah.
know, they the people, when you actually are with another human being and you're having a conversation, you're having that sit down, you're in a room with people and you're collaborating. Like a band. Like if I come in with a band and we're in the studio and we're coming up with some ideas, sometimes we'll just say, hey, let's see what happens if we just put something down.
Yeah.
And in other situations, you might have a guy that's kind of like an alpha, and he writes the whole thing,
Yeah.
and then he dictates the parts to everybody, and
Yeah.
then it's got to be exactly what he said, and then that's not fun unless
Right.
you like that. But most of the time, it's not fun. Most of the time is like if you have a true collaborative effort, and the drummer gets to actually put what they feel it needs, and a bass player puts what they feel the bass line should be. That is more of a real back and forth
That's
communication. It
really
feels like
lateral mentoring. It's
yeah,
taking if you have a group and you leave out people's expertise, it isn't complete, like you said, and it's not
it's
as
top
fun.
down. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It usually runs in business too. If you get people who are kind of top down, they just, I don't listen to anything from the floor because
Right.
you didn't go to Carnegie Mellon. You're not an engineer. So if somebody on the floor says, "Well, this could be better," it's like, "Well, you're not an engineer," and they just push it down. Versus an organization that takes the information from people on the floor saying, "Hey, this could be better. I actually work with this all day. I think it could be better in this way." And if you listen to that feedback, then there's more respect and then people feel more a part of it.
I
So
think people who are artists and who play music and who understand that, it's the connections with others and the other viewpoints of others that make something richer and deeper. That's intuitive, I think, in art. And I really love being able to have this conversation with you because very few artists, I have talked to very few artists about this. And, my dad was an artist and he was able to give me a lot of the wisdom that I have, about how you connect to others, how you should ask others for help. You're not a burden to them. Like if you're in music and you say, hey, tell me the idea about this, no one's going to be like, what are you asking me for? And, so he really told me that no one's going to say, hey, I'm not going to answer you or help you out. People are built to want to do that. And that was a transformation for me. It was really saying, yeah, you're right. People want to connect and they want to help and they want to put their input into things.
Yeah, instead when you have kind of a bad environment where that's not like the norm, when people feel afraid,
Yeah.
they don't feel safe. Like, I've
Right.
been on organizations and I've kind of gone away from those and gone to organizations that kind of fit my left right brain.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I tend to want to be able to do this the same way I do my music. I want to be able to do my software design. So if I'm in
Yeah.
an organization that actually listens and allows me to stretch
Yeah.
out, then I'll go in more of a small business startup mindset rather than corporate kind of in the box. The more in the box, the more I go away from it. The more out of the box, the more I go toward it.
Yeah. That's when I talk to tech people, that's very common. The entire tech industry was founded on lateral mentoring. There's nobody that invented anything all by themselves.
Yeah,
They all had to have other people, and
cross
people will
collaboration.
yeah, and people will call it collaboration, but if you really look at it, it's two experts. So if you're a software engineer and you have likely needed to consult with an expert in hardware engineering to be able to make something happen, or a different
Area.
component of tech.
Yeah, there's tons
And
of different areas.
and that's really, if we think about it, if you go someplace in a business world that isn't tech, that would be, two experts asking each other for something. It's kind of like the founding of this country. All of those individuals were experts in different things that came together and made the country. Had one person come, it would have been different. But that's the same in tech, that, if you look at the Apple computer, if you look
Yeah,
at anything that people
yeah,
now know and they just take for granted, it wasn't one person. One person maybe be getting top billing, but there were a lot of experts in things that
yeah. A lot of
made
unsung people. Like, you go look at Amazon, Jeff Bezos' name, Elon Musk.
right.
You look under the covers, which, like, I'm a tech. I look at the guys that don't get
Yeah.
their name in the press. Like, those, all those foundational people, like those are the guys that came up with AWS. Came up with these ideas are coming from. There's all these people want to be the Henry Ford. They want
Yeah,
to be the person that everybody's thinking, what, they did it all. Like, no, they didn't. Like,
exactly.
there's a lot of people. It's not just one person that magically comes and has all these ideas, right? Sometimes you have a Da
Yeah.
Vinci, but that's not usually what's going on.
We all have ideas, but that's why they sit in a drawer, right? Because we don't have somebody else who can help bring it out. But we are here talking, and we have a network firewall that is making it safe for us to communicate, and that helps us to do that. And one of the fathers of the firewall, the network firewall, was Bill Cheswick, and he was at Bell Labs. And most of us don't ever think, how did it become that we can talk,
Like
from
this, yeah.
faraway places with each other? But he was tasked with creating a network firewall, like way back before there was ever computers and anything that we use currently. And he sat at his desk and he got as far as he could get. And then he said, gee, I've gotten as far as I can with the engineering skills that I have. And you're top notch if you're at Bell Labs. It's not like you're a slouch, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't like, it was like, oh, well. So what he did was he took himself in his wheelie chair from his desk and wheelied himself down the hall to Steve Bellovin's desk and he said, Steve, I know you know a different kind of engineering than I do. Can you teach it to me so that I can try to solve this problem that I have for work called the network firewall? And Steve had he didn't have any part of that job, but he was a nice guy. And he was like, I want to help out Bill.
Yeah.
So he helped Bill and used his expertise to teach Bill. The two of them worked on it together so that Steve was sort of infusing what he knew, and Bill was able to take it and then move it forward with what he knew. And together then they wrote the first book on network firewalls. And off it went. But it wouldn't have happened without Steve, right? Steve didn't get it was Bill's job at work. And Steve helped. We do that all the time. If somebody calls you up and says, "Hey, Phantom, can you help me with something?" You'll probably say, "Yeah, sure, of course, I'll help you." But that's you taking your expertise and mentoring somebody else. And Steve Bellevin was a mentor to Bill Cheswick. But that's how something we use every day came about, was lateral mentorship. And tech is notorious for having that sort of thing happen in that way.
Yeah, because there's a limitation, like you know what you don't know, and then you
Yeah,
know somebody down the hall or somebody over at this other company. You've been reading their white papers and say,
exactly.
"Well,
Yeah.
they're oh they're doing this." So then you call them on the phone because like you're like, "Hey," everybody kind of knows who's like. It's like the ego becomes like less important than trying to solve the problem. Like if
Yes.
you're in a situation where it's like about ego or having a upper hand and you want to keep a secret. A lot of times,
Yeah.
like in music, like the cross collaborations, like people is like, well, I want to keep my secret style. I won't teach anybody what I'm doing. But if you want to actually expand, like
Yeah.
Miles Davis, you bring like Herbie Hancock, you bring all these Chick Corea, he brings all these people at like just as at a super high level and not scared that oh they're better than me. Like
Yeah.
you just say like you bring somebody around like a Bowie brought Luther Vandross, and so he wanted to get into soul, and he knew
Mhm.
that Luther could sing better than he could,
Yeah.
but it's like he wanted to learn. So you
Yeah.
go and you put your ego down and you say, "Hey, I need to get into this, and I know you're better at it than me." And it's like, so the ego becomes less of a thing. It's like you're trying to solve or create the new thing. So
Exactly.
then, and that's hard for some people because the ego is everything.
And that's what, when you're young, your ego is what is really in the way. You're supposed to be sort of taking in, right, when you're young. But once you hit midlife, we're built to want to give back. Our ego is not in the front the way it was before. We want to make those connections. That takes a back seat because we're more comfortable with what we know and how we're an expert in what we do and what it is that we want to pass on. So you're right. Midlife, though, is the point where we can really do that easily and effortlessly, and we don't even think about it. And that's kind of the beauty of it all. If we're more able to acknowledge that we have the opportunity to give to others in ways that we may have been taking for granted or not thinking about, it'll make us do it more, and vice versa. We'll be able to give more and we'll be able to receive more because we'll say, you know what, I'm going to ask for help more often. I'm not going to wait, or I'm not going to just
Yeah.
shelve something because I feel like I've gotten as far as I can get. I'm going to ask somebody to help me to take it farther. And that's what we do when we understand the real core components of mentorship and how they work.
And vulnerability, a lot of times, like art in the arts, vulnerability is our secret sauce. The fact that we can be willing to put ourselves into vulnerable positions
Yeah.
and to actually, deal with the fact, oh, I kind of like you're putting your hand up in the classroom and nobody wants to do that because it's like it's not the safe
Yeah.
zone. Because
Yeah.
if you do that, then you're going to reveal that maybe your answer makes you doesn't make you look in the best light.
Yeah.
Right. But if there's no stupid question, but the people think there are.
Yeah.
And the people who are willing to ask them with the so-called question that gets your little egg on their face, but it's like, you don't progress without making mistakes. It's like we call it like happy accidents. It's like
Yeah.
in music, some of the best music was not intentional. It's like a
Right.
lot of mistakes that you actually kept on record, and you're like, oh, that actually works. And then you
Yeah.
you go with it, and it's like, and somebody thinks you're brilliant. They're like, no, I didn't really mean to do that. I kind of just accepted it and like, let's see where he goes. There's no bad note. There's an opportunity. If
You
you
know,
look at it.
you're so right about vulnerability. That's a tough one for a lot of us, is to be able to trust someone else, to be able to put our trust in someone that they aren't going to either steal our idea, that they aren't
Yeah.
going to, that's a big one for people, or that they aren't going to look at us like we're stupid, or something like that. So it's really, for the mentor, it's, gee, might they steal something if I give away my information? And for a mentee, it is, I don't want to look dumb. And so those are two things that we really have to grapple with. when we're thinking about being vulnerable. In some cases, there's legitimacy to some people who say, I don't trust everybody I'm around because I could have something stolen from me.
Yeah,
And
it's kind of common.
right.
It happens.
And not every person is going to say, I'm going to go tell my boss I don't know what I'm doing. That's
Well,
not
yeah,
always the best idea
that's not the
either.
best
So,
way to maybe frame it. Maybe use the wordsmith it a little different.
yeah, exactly. But that vulnerability component, there's legitimacy to it. People say, well, just show your vulnerability. But you have to really be vulnerable with the people that that you can be vulnerable with.
Yeah, that's true.
You can't just walk down the street and do that with everybody. You'll have stuff stolen from you,
Yeah.
and you might not put yourself in the best light. So
You're gonna put yourself in the dark corner of the street when there's like a bunch of wolves at the door. It's like, no, that's probably not the best place to do it.
right.
But like when you're, at the coffee shop with a bunch of other artists, being willing to put your voice out there and maybe do something that hadn't been done,
Yeah.
that's kind of the place you could do it.
Yeah.
Kind of like the Bob Dylan kind of analogy, like going electric. Maybe it wasn't the best place to do it in England when he did it, or at the jazz festival when he did it. But he still felt like, well, I'm going to do it in this place because I feel like I need to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. We have to look at that within ourselves and say, how comfortable do I feel? And what would make me feel more comfortable if you are in a position where you say, hey, I'm around somebody. Why am I feeling like this? Is it legitimate or is it not legitimate? So yeah, you don't want to be daft.
It also can be at the point where, like, if you keep on doing the same thing, that's actually more uncomfortable than kind of pushing it. Maybe where it's not, what I mean? If you phone it in, that can become uncomfortable versus kind of treading into a little bit of deep water.
There's the whole Ebenezer Scrooge example that I always like to give, and I talk about it in the book, all sorts of examples that are from film and from writing. People who have everything on paper, like Scrooge was a self-made guy living in a mansion. He had servants taking care of his needs and he was miserable. He never trusted others, never opened up, and never gave anything to anyone. And the second he changed that and started to give, he felt amazing. He felt joy. That's literally how it works in real life. And sometimes people are inappropriately not trusting of others. They're closed off. They're not vulnerable in ways. And sometimes it takes saying, hey, what are you waiting for? Are you just going to be Daffy Duck standing on your pile of riches and all by yourself? Because that's not a fun way to live. We all feel better when, we're able to give a gift to someone and we can see them open it and we get the joy of seeing them unwrap something that is just what they wanted or something that'll just help them so much. And that's where, if we can be more mindful of how we're interacting with our connections and how we are giving and taking, that's helpful for not only expanding our mentorship, but expanding, the wheel keeps turning. It doesn't stop with us. Our expertise doesn't end there. And, I think of it as burning down libraries of knowledge and information. If one person's knowledge is wasted because of themselves or others not, seeing it as valuable, it's like burning down a library.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of kind of closed-minded, kind of behavior where people, they just don't want to share knowledge, or they think they're scared of knowledge. Like if you get scared of certain, certain things, it's more comfortable for some people to stay in the box than to kind of push the envelope. So as soon as you ask the question and you open up, it's like, well, you shouldn't ask that question because we need to stay here. Because if we ask that question, we're going to get booed out of the tribe. And then we're going to be dealing with all the wolves and the saber-tooths, and we're not going to have comfort. But like sometimes it's actually, to me, it's more scary to stay in the tribe doing the same thing over and over without pushing it.
Yeah. It's important for us to all know that if you're around somebody who makes you feel like you need to be inside of a box, expand the people you're with to people that don't make you feel that way.
Hmm. Yeah, I think you have to change your environment because
Yeah.
sometimes and it's hard because sometimes that you have a codependency with your environment,
Yeah.
right?
People can.
It's like it might be like I know I'm gonna be. I mean, I get a certain paycheck, or I know I have an expectation. It can be comforting to a certain extent until you hit the critical mass where suddenly it's not comfortable anymore.
Yeah, that's true. And then you have to act. Then that's the perfect time to say, hey, maybe I should get a mentor to help me get
Yeah,
out of this.
yeah, because sometimes you have a limitation of what you can do yourself, and then
Yeah.
you have to look toward like who outside of yourself can help you.
Yeah.
Where a lot of people, the individualism kind of tells people like, "Oh, you got to do it yourself. You got to be self-made." You get in all these self-made stories, and like it's not just them.
Exactly. Every self-made story has like 100 people behind that self-made person.
But they want to tell you it's just them.
Yeah,
It's like a Horatio Alger myth, it's like
that's
this idea.
true.
Yeah, people got this idea and they feel like, well, you can't ask for help because that's actually like that's not a good place to be. And like that's where people need to kind of
Yeah,
that
they do.
break that loop.
Yeah, that they do need to because you really then are standing alone. And if you feel that way, now we never got anywhere alone. But imagine feeling that you got someplace and you're all alone. It's a terrible feeling. When we feel like we're connected with others, it doesn't detract from our intelligence or our abilities. It only enhances it because you then get to see the power of the connections with everybody who's around you. It has a bigger feeling of power. If I know that someone helped me to do what I did, then I have that power of that other person right there with me. It's actually a good feeling. It doesn't detract or make me feel like I'm less of a person because I didn't do something all by myself.
Mm. Yeah, because a lot of times we see in social media, it seems to have people are projecting these kind of illusionary visions or,
Yeah, social media does that.
or augmented. Like, oh, I did this in like all by myself in 10 steps, and you can do all by yourself in 10 steps. And it's like, okay,
Yeah.
is that real? Probably not.
No, and that's also a lonely existence. If you say, who likes to live in a vacuum all by themselves? It's not a fun place to be. So if you feel like you can want to get someplace all by yourself and you can post that out all by yourself that you've done all of this, who are you sharing it with?
Yeah.
Who's there to reflect any of that good stuff back to you? It's not a great place to be.
I mean, even every author I've talked to, they got their beta readers, they've got their
Yep.
friends, every story they have is like it's come from the culture, it's come from life, and
Oh, for sure.
it's not just like life sitting in a room at the typewriter. It's like all the things outside of that room that you end up
Yeah.
bringing to the typewriter.
When I was writing my book, I had I first would run everything by my husband. He's an amazing editor anyway. So he would give me a set of fresh eyes and say, "What I don't understand what you said here," or something like that. But then I also had an editor. And then after that editor was done, they gave it to another editor and another. It went through like 7 million people, it felt like. It was
Mhm.
not just me. And so by the time the book is done, they've looked at it, have we missed any typo? Has there been anything at all that was missed here? So that book was not just me. That was a lot of people that were involved in getting that out there. Now they don't put their names on the book, but
Mhm.
honestly, they should. There should be a section for everybody that worked on a book because it doesn't matter if it was my idea. If I can't get it out there, what good is it?
Yeah, it's kind of like when you look at music, you might
Yeah.
see like a big example like Prince did. Like his whole thing was like he wrote, produced, arranged, and played,
Yeah.
but he had recording engineers. He had you know other people that were around him that influenced what he was doing. And there's like in the whole recording process, there's like between the engineers and the producers and the sound expert, there's a lot of people involved,
Yeah.
and it's not just you, right? And so there's a lot to the image. So your designers that design your clothes, to the lighting people, to
Yep.
the sound people, and then when you get your band, like you got to teach your band and your band. There's so much there, and it's all they always want to put it on one person because it's like that's the story that they, A&R people want to push it out. They're like you're the only one. But
It's funny. Oh, sorry.
no, it's fine.
It's funny that you say that because I was watching, I had never really watched the shows before, the ones like the Voice and
Mhm.
other, shows where they have the singer and they come out and they come out in the very beginning and they look kind of raw. It's a person that's just wearing jeans or whatever. And then over time they develop a whole different look. They're also getting mentored on their sound and how they're
Yeah, and
presenting
presentation
themselves.
too, yeah.
But if you look at them from day one to the end, if those that make it to the end, they look completely different also. They've got so many people that are giving them advice on how to present themselves, how to sound, all of that. And
Yeah, your
it's kind of
voice
fun to watch that.
teachers, your theater teacher. 'Cause like
Yeah.
music's all about like a presentation.
Yeah.
So like your stage self is not your normal self that you go to the store
Yeah.
and buy some coffee. Your stage self is because you practice. You go back to Motown.
Right.
Motown used to have these classes that Barry Gordy would put all the people through on kind of etiquette and presentation and look and how to dress and how to actually go on the microphone. Like actually what distance to be at the microphone and how to actually get your voice to carry the records. Like there was all these classes. They actually taught the musicians through classes.
Wow.
It was a very detailed. If you read the history, you're like, wow, that's like what you think you would need.
Yeah. Yeah. We all need that. That's how we get to become the experts and the professionals that we are. So I love that to be able to see inside, because a person doesn't become a stage performer overnight. Just, like you said, you don't walk to the grocery store like that. It gives insight into how many people are there helping to make that happen. And that's really mentorship.
And even in business, you get to be that leader. And like they go through like how to present, like
Yeah,
how to
that's
carry
true.
yourself. Now today people go through they go through classes like Toastmaster.
Yeah.
There's a lot of feedback going back and forth. People really reviewing like every step, and people were thinking like, oh, this person's like self-made. It's like, no, there's a lot of mentors. There's a lot of missteps. There's things that they didn't do perfectly. They're
Yeah.
happy accidents, like, starts and stops. It's like everything is like a big journey. It's like a 10,000 hour that an athlete, right? And they're doing that, whatever their 3-point shot. And they're
Yeah.
days and days, different angles to get it. But when they're under pressure, it's just automatic. It looks like, oh, they just know how to do it, but they put the work in. It's like, and they had a coach that probably showed them different things, and they had other people that challenged them to get them to be able to do it under pressure. So he's like, it's the practice, it's the work.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And we're kind of taught today that like, oh, you're just individual. Individualism is so, being an artist, I'm kind of like, yeah, there's individualism, you have your voice, but then there's community
Yeah.
and there's history. And people seem to forget about history. Like there's a lot that you can learn by going deep into something and trying to
Oh, yeah.
find out like what's the history of the blues, what's the history of progressive rock, what's the history of different types of forms of art that you're into, or even when you're taking your course from a therapist, is like all the thought leaders,
Yeah.
and different opinions, so that you can have different shades of whatever you need to understand, and the more information you have, the better you're going to make an assessment.
Yeah. Absolutely. You brought up a good point. You talked about how, we're we're very much taught to be individuals, and that's not always the case. You're around the same age as me, and we had a lot of community engagement that we were expected to do when I was in high school. You know, right around the time that I was in high school is when they got rid of candy stripers and other people who went out to hospitals to volunteer. But we had a component in our high school where you needed to do volunteer work in the community in some way. And nowadays they don't really have that. That's really brought about as a way to make your resume to go to college better, but it's not to really learn about people outside of yourself. And I've noticed over time that there was this real desire to build a brand for yourself as opposed to saying, how do I connect with others around me? And that really stunts
How do you get
people.
part of the community? It's like we lost the civic connection to the
Yeah.
community.
And that civic component is connected to mentoring, because you feel when you get to midlife and you're saying, gee, I don't know how to give back what I have. Well, if you've been engaged in civic engagement all along, you're just doing it always and you're preparing for that. It's seamless. It happens without a problem. But now, you know, I'm seeing that people have a harder time understanding some of the concepts. They'll be like, well, what can I get out of volunteering? How can I make volunteering work for me? Well, that's not the point of volunteering.
Like the Wall Street point of view.
Yeah, there's a reciprocal sort of thing where there's an expectation of something for yourself, and that's the exact opposite of what civic engagement is all about. And so civic engagement is putting yourself out and seeing that you're just a person in the world and there's a whole world there, and it makes you feel like you can connect with the world. If you are working on a brand for like 20 years and just yourself, you then have to say, oh my goodness, now I'm looking around and the world is so big and it's intimidating, and how do I interact in the world? And that's harder for us when we've lived like that.
Yeah, if you haven't done the work to actually be connected.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people have gotten disconnected just because they're kind of given like maybe the wrong.
And social media is not civic engagement. That is not true connection. It's when you're actually going and you're helping somebody. You know, if you went in and you were helping somebody in your community at your house of worship, or, you know, if you were out helping people to vote or helping people to, you know, who are in hospitals or other places, that is saying I'm taking myself out of the equation in some respect and trying to focus on somebody else. And that's the difference that I'm seeing now, that makes it a little trickier for us to, you know, engage fully in mentorship the way that we could.
I think it's a hard place to be for, I guess, young people that don't have that different point of view of the world.
Yeah.
Because when you don't have that, then it's a lot harder, I think, to really connect. Where you try to get people to be more involved in more things, like music. You know, when you're in a band or an orchestra, or if you're in a sports team, you can learn about, like, it's not just you. It's like the whole. But if you don't get part of that, you have to find other ways to get to that.
Yeah. Exactly. So that's some of the, you know, a person, if they're feeling like, gee, I'm not quite sure how to connect in that way, you're not alone. You're right there with everybody else who has been sort of brought up in the same kind of way, you know, from my age on down, to sort of put yourself in a silo or in your own lane, and it's moving yourself out of that lane that really you'll find is a much more exciting place to be when you start connecting. I'm terrible at social media because I don't get any gratification out of it. It feels empty to me because I'm not really connecting with a person. I'm connecting with things that aren't alive or real.
Yeah.
And so if a person has only come across knowing how to connect in that way, it can be tricky to be able to know how that good feeling of a natural connection can make you feel, because you're expecting, a like or a thumbs up or something that is out there that makes you feel externally gratified to occur, that is not intrinsic like you get with the gratification of a natural connection.
Yeah, the in-person connection is so much more gratifying than the algorithm saying, "Oh, I got 1,000 views and 1,000 likes and thumbs ups," and is that the same as actually having that deep conversation that I go have with some musician and we just start talking about like, oh, some Sun Ra album, we get lost in it, we're talking about it for 2 hours, and we're
Yeah.
not trying to gain anything. We're just having a conversation. Sometimes you have a conversation and the point wasn't that you were going to gain anything other than this is a cool conversation to have with this person.
Yeah. I mean, we
Yeah.
can have that in a tech way. We can connect with people in that way. It's just different if it's, on LinkedIn or Facebook or YouTube. It's different than it is if I'm having an actual conversation with you. I now
Yeah.
know you a little better, right? Because I get to ask questions that help me to clarify what you're saying, or to say, yeah, I agree with you on that. There's a connection there that we're able to work with as we have a conversation.
Yeah, I think people have to learn how to, get back into the world. Kinda maybe the pandemic got us into these kinda closed off
I don't
connections.
know. I see it a little differently. I feel much more connected after the pandemic.
Oh, wow.
I met people all around the world, and it is in this kind of way, but some I got to meet in person and others I would have never met otherwise. But it moved me from social media as like seeing how people are, to actually I get on Zoom all the time and I'm able
Yeah,
to
yeah,
meet with
different thing.
people, and I feel so connected that way. Um, is it better to be connected in person? Some people I get to meet in person, but I'll take what I have over not having it at all.
Yeah, I would say, what I've been able to do with the podcast, the thousands of episodes, just the people all over the world I've been able to connect with,
Yeah.
and I had lived in Tokyo and I had traveled before the pandemic, um, but I actually been able to reach more people than even when I was traveling. So
Yeah.
so it's like the tech is cool in that way, and it's like, the Zoom kind of the StreamYards, these new tech ways of talking in real time
Yeah.
are so vital, at least for what I do as a podcaster. But even when I'm working with people, sometimes I've worked with bands and we've done like kind of Zoom collaborations on songs
That's
where we'll
cool.
be able to talk to, somebody in the West Coast or somebody in Tokyo or somebody in like Norway or Netherlands, and you can actually work on something that you couldn't, you would have had to fly there, they would have to fly to you, and then you can actually, you're in your studio, they're in their studio, you're sending files, you're real time talking to each other. And it's like, wow, we can actually do something that we never thought we could do.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
That's a cool thing. That's a positive thing. That's how I love to use tech for that, because I think
Yeah, that's a
that's a
great
good way
example.
of kind of mentoring each other. You know, as you said, the kind of lateral thing that happens.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's all about none of this would can happen without connections. So, you've done like 1,200 podcasts. That's 1,200 conversations that you've had with people, 1,200 people that you've connected with. That's pretty amazing. That's all tech related. That's all an advancement, because you're able to see people and talk with them in real time. That I think is amazing that we have that ability. I mean, you probably are in continuous conversation with some of those people, and
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
yeah. It ends up being like a Rolodex.
Yes. Yes.
Like I get opportunities all the time where people, ping me and say, "Hey, I talked to you back in this time, or 3 months ago, or 2 years ago,
Yeah.
and you want to do this, or this person would probably want to talk to you." And then you get this. It's a constant stream of opportunities
Yeah.
because
It's
you've
good.
been having this kind of hands-on talking with people, and so you end up getting more opportunities through a conversation. Like I was able to get a job because I talked to somebody,
Yeah.
not like a LinkedIn, but actually went through my role. Somebody,
Yeah.
you need somebody because I've talked so much. I felt confident enough to do that. Some people don't feel
Yes.
I've got to go through the system.
You can
But
be vulnerable.
yeah, but it's harder to actually get
Yeah.
on the phone and call somebody.
Yes, exactly. You know a
Or
little bit about them. You know that you can trust them.
yeah,
Exactly. It becomes like a spider web in a way where you have all of these connections that are interconnected all over the place, but they all come back to you, so you might have 1,200 people that are all over the place, but those connections, you're at the center of it, which is like
yeah,
pretty darn amazing.
and it spawns like other people talking to each other. I've actually
Yeah,
had people collaborate because they saw somebody here, and then they
that's
went
cool.
and talked to them, and then they actually worked on something. And
That's
to
very
me,
cool.
it's like that. To me, is like that's the point.
Yeah.
I always wanted to get other artists or other creative people kind of have this collective
Yeah.
and like a musical collective, and people kind of bounce. It's like, oh, I'll work with this band, or I'll go work with this painter, or I'll go work with this actor, and we'll
Yeah.
go work on something. And that's the whole point, is like get people with like-minded creativity to like
Mhm.
see that, oh, there is a permission structure. Go talk to them,
Yeah.
and maybe
Yeah.
you can actually do something together.
Yeah. Absolutely. No,
Like,
that's exactly how it works. It's so cool.
yeah, I think like that's what we've been talking about today. Like, and it always goes by quicker than I ever imagined. Like we already hit the hour, but we do
Right.
have your mentorproject.org there, and we hadn't talked about it. If people click on that, is that how they connect with you?
Yeah, that you can find out more about the Mentor Project there. We offer free mentoring to students around the world from world-class experts. And so you can check it out. I'm on there as well. You can reach me at deborahheiser.com, and you can find my book, The Mentorship Edge, anywhere you buy books.
That's awesome, and that's fully clickable. In the podcast description, we were just live on YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook. And so that mentorproject.org will be clickable. You'll be able to go right through on that. And we'll be on all the major podcast platforms where you can listen to or watch a podcast by tomorrow.
Wonderful. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for having me on your show today, Phantom.
Always a great. I like what you're doing. Paying it forward is always cool. I,
Thanks.
I'm a big supporter of that type of work. So thank you for being on the show, and keep on doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too.